Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
A government that is incapable of destroying non-state coercive actors is as harmful to the cause of freedom as a coercive state itself. We live at a time when our friends and our enemies are becoming more clear. Our strategic resources and our assets are under more threat to be taken over by foreign entities. And at a time when refining our future growth, potential and lack of industrial policy will threaten Canada's economic future, safeguarding the resources we have while also attracting good investment has become paramount, not only to the success of our country, but to our children's success. After 8 years of this Liberal-NDP government, numerous foreign state enterprises have acquired interest and control in many Canadian companies, our IP, intangible assets, and data. Billions of dollars of Canadian natural resources, ideas, IP, land, farms have left Canada and have been controlled by foreign enemies. It reminds me of the story of the giving tree that I sometimes read to my children. After 8 years, this Prime Minister and the Industry Minister have been the giving tree givers of Canada's industry, IP, and land. You see in the story, we have a little boy who comes to a tree, and the little boy says, "Can I have your leaves?" And the tree gives him our leaves. Of course, in January 2022, the Industry Minister failed to follow his own guidelines when he fast-tracked the takeover of a Canadian lithium company, Neo Lithium Corporation, by Chinese state-owned Zijin Mining without a national security review. And of course, we lost those leaves. It was one of the only companies in Canada that produces lithium, critical for producing batteries. We had Huawei, a state-owned enterprise that feeds intelligence directly to China, as this summer, still working with many Canadian universities. This is just like the boy who gave away or asked for the trunk and got given the trunk of the tree. The government also made commitments for billions of dollars to Volkswagen, Stellantis, and other battery plants, with literally all of the mine material composing the batteries coming from state-owned Chinese companies, not Canadian-owned critical mineral or mines. You see, this was the branches that this industry minister came to Canada with, these branch plants. And taxpayer-funded dollars at Dalhousie University are funding Tesla IP and research, which is all going back to California. You see, Madam Speaker, this is the stump. So at the end of the Giving Tree story, at the end of when the little boy asked for all these items, the branches, the leaves, the trunk, and the stump, Canadians are left with nothing, as all of these companies, foreign-owned and controlled, have left Canada, and we are left with only the roots. As Canada loses literally billions of dollars IP and resources, this government and this giving tree of a Prime Minister is literally not worth the cost, as these investments go elsewhere and Canadians don't benefit from the outcomes. The future of our country, Canada, is in protecting our sovereignty, our land, our farms, natural resources, and technological assets and IP, while simultaneously attracting foreign investment that benefits Canadians and this country. It is imperative that we demand transparency and accountability from our government regarding foreign ownership and its consequences. We must advocate for policies that strike a balance between attracting international investment and safeguarding our national interests. We need regulations that prevent the unchecked outflow of intellectual property, ensure that our economic landscapes remain robust and sustainable for generations to come. We must be able to produce the stuff in Canada, getting international investment, benefiting Canada and Canadians, creating powerful paychecks and GDP right here in this nation. With a new Indo-Pacific strategy aimed at countering a disruptive China that includes military, domestic security, and cybersecurity enhancements, we must ensure that we restrict the involvement of foreign state-owned firms in some of our most critical sectors, including Canada's critical mineral sectors. Conservatives with C-34 looked at this bill, and we submitted amendments. We had an amendment to reduce the threshold to trigger a national security review from $512 million to $0 for all state-owned enterprises, and I'm glad that that amendment went through. We ensure that the items reviewable under national security review process, including acquisitions of any assets by a state-owned enterprise. And we believe that decisions need to be made that allows Cabinet, not one minister, to make those decisions that are important to what should be reviewed and should not. No power should reside in all one minister. It's been famously said by Kanye West, no one man should have all that power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. The one thing that the Americans in the UK do differently with national security reviews is they utilize all of the federal departments in the process. The USA utilizes CFIUS, an international committee authorized to review certain transactions involving foreign investment. The USA gives the criteria to which CFIUS considers, oftentimes directed by the President of the United States. In Canada, under the current bill, that power would delineate to the INDU and to the public safety ministers instead of making sure that at the very least a cabinet decision. And that would severely hamper our national security. Well, why? In 2017, the Liberal government allowed a telecom company from BC called Norsat to be acquired by a company called Hytera, which is a Chinese-based company, state-owned. Hytera does not make any money. Conservatives demanded at the time a full national security review. The Liberal minister of the day refused to do one and approved the acquisition. And lo and behold, in 2022, Hytera was charged with 21 counts of espionage in the United States and was banned from doing business there. But only 8 months later, the RCMP in Canada shockingly bought telecommunications equipment from Hytera to put in its communications system. The government says the change would streamline the process and give more security and intelligence agencies more time to complete the reviews. But as it currently stands, if the minister and this public safety minister were only responsible for those reviews, they would miss the mark, as they did with Hytera. We have another example, and more hypothetically. What if this minister, the industry minister, was from Ontario and the public safety minister was from Manitoba and about to make a decision about a security review in Quebec? Would Quebec cabinet ministers not want to be guaranteed feedback and a say in cabinet? If we give that power to just one minister and take away the in-order power and the power of cabinet, we would potentially lose that input from ministers across the whole country into something as important as national security. I've shared with my colleagues with satisfaction that we are seeing intangible assets included under this review, and I wanted to mention this today because it's very important. There are alarming statistics about how much of our intellectual property leaves this country. The University of Waterloo said 75% of its software engineer grads are being pilfered to leave Canada to go elsewhere. The U.S. has 169 times the IP production of Canada. Canada produces $39 billion worth of IP a year, but the U.S. produces $6.6 trillion, or 169 times the IP that Canada does. Not only do we need to develop and commercialize the IP, but through this legislation, we also need to protect that. And it's very important, as the economy of tomorrow is intangible and full of ideas, that we do all we can to ensure we protect the ideas that come out of Canada and not lose them. We have the largest gaps in the world. The OECD has forecasted that Canada will have one of the worst performing economies in the developed world in the next 25 years. Canada has not been able to keep up with the world when it comes to IP and a knowledge-based economy. Canadian policy is still firmly grounded in industrial-era concepts, and it's failing to develop national strategies for IP and data. China developed 30,000 patents in IE just last year, in AI. 30,000. Canada developed fewer than 30,000 patents in all of our industries across all sectors. The future of Canada needs to be protecting the airwaves, blockchain, AI, quantum computing, the sky overhead and the Arctic. It needs to be protecting our farms, food processing plants, genomics, oceans and fisheries, as well as develop Canadian LNG, which the world is desperately screaming for. Going back to the Giving Tree story, unlike the government, figuratively and literally, the Conservatives would just plant more trees and protect those trees. When we give the world what Canada makes, Canadians make paychecks and Canadians benefit. Let's agree to support this bill with a Conservative amendment to remove the power from the minister and make sure it stays in cabinet, of course, in the future with a Conservative government that only protect available investment but build Canadian companies and attract investment to grow them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.